Episode 27. Guys, we're on our way to friggin' 30 already. That's ridiculous. That is so ridiculous. Let's get all this set up. Make sure that I can see you people. Not that I want to, because I have seen some of you, and it'd be a lot easier if I didn't. But let's make it interesting. I like to be attacked by my audience, and I know that my audience likes to attack me. So let's just do it. Come on, trying to make all this work. Hope everyone's going good out there. Hope we got all the interesting stuff happening. Here we go, public. Yes. All right. If you guys are there, say hi. Brian Manell's there. How have I been lately? Thank you for asking. Damn, dude. Look, we're already starting this episode. We have a really nice Christian boy today who we're going to be interviewing, and you guys started in this really nice, generous way. Wow. This is like a whole different show. Should we get a different host, like a nice person? I've been good, man. I just had a signing on Sunday, which went really well. I got to hang out with my boy Doug Brown, who you guys have seen on the show a couple times. Really good dude. He's my ever table mate because we live within an hour of each other, so we're always tabling together and whatnot. So that was cool. It wasn't anything huge. It was just a little store showing for our dude Harley Slavic, but it was fun. We got to get out. It was really good, man. So yeah, it was good. What about you? How are you guys doing? Yeah, today we got a good guest. We've got Jack Holder here, who is a writer. I believe he does some editing as well. He's done prose. So we've got an author here as well. Lots of room for the authors going on. It was awesome. I did have a good time. And we always go out afterwards and have drinks and stuff. So yeah, it was great. He's a really good dude. He's worked on his own anthologies and stuff. So yeah, it's great. Brian Wensloff is in the house. What's going on, buddy? Okay. See, now those numbers are coming up. All right, they're churning. I've noticed more people are having shows on Tuesdays, but not like a Chuck show, right? Kyron Silva's in the house. Dude, how you doing, homie? Guys, feel free to leave lots of questions today. Come at me. Come at us hard. We're going to have a lot of fun. Me and Jack and I, we're going to talk about processes. We're going to have a good old time. And we're going to talk about anything else you guys want to. Open books. Treat this like an AMA, boys and ladies. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think there's many gentlemen in here, though, is there? Pretty sure not. But you guys know what time it is. Let's make it happen.
Canadian bacon is actually really good, and it's nothing like normal bacon, and it's better than ham, which you guys seem to call Canadian bacon. I'm very good at writing. I write very well. Yeah, it's Shop Talk.
Do some of your audience members like the word fuck? Cool. Then I'm going to keep saying fuck. Because I care.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
I'm doing well. Sorry, I am reading some of the comments. Well,
oh, I thought you were reacting to the opener, and I was like, yeah, I expected that.
No, this is
yeah. Yeah, don't worry. A lot of those comments, Kyron, I'm looking at you right now, buddy, will not be shown. Katrina, hello, how are you, my dear? Good to see you. You crazy people. I'm glad you've been good. I've been very good. Everything's going terrific. And of course, yeah, see, Kyron says Jack is regretting this already. Yeah, he probably is. Yeah. And that's fair, man. I would be too. But Jack, thank you so much for coming on the show. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you?
All right. Thank you so much for having me on, Chuck.
Yeah.
So my name is Jack Holder. I am a Massachusetts native, fantasy nerd, Christian nerd, nerd of all shapes and sizes. I write fantasy prose and comics. I also edit, as Chuck was mentioning before the title crawl. I've got a couple anthologies. One that's out right now, Why Faith, The second one, The Great Commandment, which I'm hoping to be able to start shipping off to our amazing Kickstarter backers from my last Kickstarter, hopefully in like the next couple of weeks. But
you seem way too nice to be a masshole.
I am, well, okay, so I was born in Wisconsin, but I have lived in Massachusetts since I was 3. So apparently I get some of the Midwestern nice. And my family's, those sort of Midwestern liberals of, if you're not nice to everyone, the entire family's going to whip your ass.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like growing up in Canada. So yeah, I totally feel you there. So usually what I do, I haven't been able to do this in a while because I've had so many groups. We've been doing panels lately. So no, masshole is actually that's a real thing, right? Yeah.
That is totally a thing. It is on bumper stickers, it is on everything.
Yeah, I did not make that up. I would love to say that I did, but no.
Put the Brian comment up.
This one right here?
Exactly. So if you're a comics writer or a comics artist or like anything, and you're at a convention outside of New England, and no, New York doesn't count as New England, and people ask you where you're from, if you're an hour or like even 2 hours away from Boston, you're from Boston. You're from just outside of Boston. If you're like in Massachusetts, you're like, well, here I can give you this town. But like that, Brian, you are completely correct. Yeah. Proximity to Boston makes you somewhat of a masshole.
I mean, it's the same as like Ontario. Ontario is a province that's the same size or bigger than Texas, but we really only have like 3 cities. So basically, it's like, where do you live? It's like you either live in Windsor, which is at the very tip, Toronto, or Ottawa. That's it. So, if you're anywhere else, you have to start explaining.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you know what's up. That was some of your Wisconsin coming out. That, oh, yeah. Never heard of it on the West Coast of thing, and we don't think much of Mass anyways over here. Well, they don't think an awful lot of you guys either, so it's all good. It's earned. Yeah. So usually what we do is we start talking about your origins, but your origins are a little bit more mixed because you're both a comic creator and an author. So yes. Why don't we kind of get into that a little bit? What are the origins of you as a fan of those mediums? And then what is your origin as a creator in those mediums?
Wow. Okay. That is so cool. Thank you. You never get these. So with fans, both of my parents are like big actual like fantasy or sci-fi nerds. And they're the different kinds of blends. And they're pretty stereotypical. Like my dad's gonna be the one who's reading the more Monster Hunter books, while my mother's gonna be reading more of the supernatural romances with guys that make me feel really self-conscious about my body on the cover.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
It's absolutely been there. No way she's watching this.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, we should both hope not.
No, so and they loved reading with everything anyway. So I grew up reading a lot of fantasy. We'd go camping, and you had to put up the Game Boy. You had to put up all phone sort of things, but they never made you put down the books. So that was before aging myself at 31. That was before all the screens and a lot more of the portables were available. So that's how I started getting into reading fantasy constantly. Like to the point of problem. Like, I would be in meetings with my teachers and my parents, and they're like, Jack's really smart, but he doesn't seem to be really focused. And my mother would turn to me, go, Jack, pull out all of the books that are in your bag right now. I'm like, I don't want to do it. And I would pull out 8 books that I was currently reading. And this is like at the age of 13. It's right around this time that I actually started thinking that I could be a writer, and it's really weird. But right around 13, 14, the Aragon series came out, Christopher Paolini. If you'll remember, terrible movie, but it was one of those things where it's like a 19-year-old comes out with a book that you could commit assault and battery with. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, you actually can do this sort of thing. Almost 20 years later, I'm like, yeah, you totally can when your parents have this much money and are willing to finance it all. Yeah. But he's still rather talented also. But that was, I completely agree, Kyron. Please, can we just reboot the Inheritance saga? And we'll get into reboots.
I own the movie and I still didn't watch it.
I watched it and I'm like, you watch it, Aragon is cast fine. Jeremy Irons always does an amazing job. But when the very first major description point is, and the elf has black hair, oh, let's make her hair red. It's like, okay. And it's one of those things where it's like, just, it's the worst part of being inspired by a book. Invincible goes the other way. Completely agree, Brian. I've read all 4 books. I'm not going to say they are amazing books. I say they are good books, and people should read them. Kyron, you are a terrible person. Don't watch Aragon, Chuck. Read Aragon. Don't watch Aragon. So that's how I started getting into that. Comics actually came in even much later. Like, I was almost through my undergrad when a dear college friend of mine, I was going to school up in Manchester, New Hampshire, and this friend was like, hey, you're going to come to the comic shop with me. Rebecca Isaacs is going to be signing comics. I'm like, but I don't really read comics. Like, I've read some. I've read Sandman, and of course, you read a bunch of the Sunday pages and funnies with like Foxtrot and Calvin and Hobbes. And she's like, no, you got to come here. Rebecca Isaacs is going to do the new Angel and Faith series. And so I went there and had an absolute blast. And I've said this, and it's so weird, but it's actually true. The thing that really helped me get into comics in a serious way was she was doing that signing, and it was right before the New 52 was being launched. So as terrible, as quantifiably terrible as so many of those series were, and that relaunch was, it let people like me come in. We had an on-ramp. So that is how I started getting into comics, but I had been writing nonstop for 6 solid years. Most of it's crap I will never let see the light of day. But
what was your first book as a novelist? As both a novelist and as a comic creator.
Published or written?
Published.
There we go. So published book would be Dealing with the Apocalypse. Everything that I've got is self-published, with the exception of Russell Nulty's anthologies and the comic book school anthologies. But for prose, it's dealing with the apocalypse. It's that short story collection for myself as I was really delving into what it meant to be a full-time professional writer. And it's stories of there's a nuclear apocalypse. It happens. Magic starts appearing. So it's like not just days, weeks, and months post-apocalyptic, but decades, centuries, even millennia down the line.
Yeah.
And my first comic actually came out before that, and it's a quick 6-pager. It is a different take on the Princess and the Frog tale. The frog's a girl. She didn't want to get kissed, and now she has to deal with freaking taxes because she's now considered a sentient creature. It's called Spells and Taxes.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
I had that's one of the things I love about comics and fantasy is sometimes you just go with it.
Yeah.
You have a crazy idea. Perfect. Keep going.
Yep.
Like that's sometimes the best work you do.
It's funny, as somebody who also very much appreciates fantasy, like fantasy is my very much my forte as well. I have found a lot of dabblers, especially in the comic world. And so like I see this a lot, like somebody who's like, oh, you got to check out my fantasy novel. And it's like, okay, or my fantasy comic. So you check it out and it's like, it just feels like a lot of the same stuff we've seen before. And they use a lot of the same stuff. Like this thing is called The Order. And you're like, The Order of what? Give it like, there's no fantastical names. They're just like, they know the generic words that you're supposed to use, and they make sure that all the generic words are in there. And I'm like, so like, this is a fantasy book for people who don't actually like fantasy books, because people who love fantasy comics and novels and stuff, they want those weird, difficult names. They want you to play with the strangeness of the genre and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, you can't just put elf ears on something and say that it's fantasy. There's so much more.
Exactly. Like if, and I'm not going to get into gatekeeping on anything with fantasy, but
oh yeah,
like you can tell it's more like science for yourself as a reader when you're like, oh my God, I'm definitely a fantasy fan. Like when you start having major opinions about certain aspects of lore and like how people are doing lore, having questions on, does Robert Jordan go way too much into detail? The answer is yes. What's your opinion on Pratchett's work versus Neil Gaiman's? Like, it really is like, that's where you know you're actually like getting to be a real fan in something, is when you start getting opinions. And so that would be my input on gatekeeping. I think would be it's not something that anyone else should be telling you. It should be an awareness that you're having for yourself of, oh, I am at this stage.
Yeah. And so I wouldn't say that. I guess it's the same with anything though. Like, if you're going to write or work in that genre, you kind of need to have a little bit of respect and understand that genre. You know what I mean? Like, you and I couldn't just pick up and necessarily write a romance, because there is a formula that goes along with romance. And anyone who really digs and loves romance novels will pick up on the fact that, oh, these guys don't know what they're doing. They don't understand that formula. And so that will be something that's picked up. So it's not gatekeeping as much as it is just understanding that, you know, if you just want to have something that has some fantasy elements, have some fun, play. But if you really want to do something that is going to get to the big fantasy heads, you actually have to know it. You have to go out there and read and kind of get into that stuff. And it's the same with anything like horror. Horror is another one where you can add horror elements to anything you do. But if you really want to get in there, you need to understand what you're doing and what has come before, because that stuff does matter to those fans. They'll pick it up and they'll know if you know what you're talking about or not.
Exactly. Really great example for me is Star Wars and Disney coming out with the new High Republic series. And I'm like, okay, is this going to be just regular old sci-fi and everything? And so I picked up Charles Soule's first book, like the entry point for the High Republic. And I'm starting to read it, and it's like, no spoilers, I promise, but we're starting to play with hyperspace. We're gonna play with what it means to go into hyperdrive and actually like what's going on in between point A and point B. And I'm like, this is so cool, and this is what this actually connects into things like The Last Jedi, and now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. If you're not a major fan of fantasy, keep watching the movies and all the stuff, because that's really fun. But if you want to take like that next step and jump on in, High Republic stuff is going to be great for you.
So, I mean, not to focus too much on that, but like it also sounds like there's a deep, because as much as because the setting is in space, a lot of people will call it sci-fi. But I would actually argue, and I think a lot of people do argue, that Star Wars is much more fantasy-based than sci-fi based. When you're talking about going into things like hyperspace and all that kind of stuff, do you think that that's also them playing more with the science fiction aspect of it, or are they doing it in more of a fantastical way?
Star Wars, I think, is one of the most fascinating things for me, because you see science fiction and fantasy, you walk into a Barnes & Noble. You don't right now, but eventually you'll be able to. And the sci-fi fantasy, it's a dash. Like everyone conflates them together when they're like almost two sides of the same coin. But Star Wars walks the edge, like straddling both. Like in terms of like story structure, almost everything with the Jedi, and the fact that they're going through so many different like families and political intrigue and everything, it feels so fantasy, but it's also so there's so much science and technology going on in there that you can explore. Like Mandalorian, you could explore so many aspects of both the Western genre and actually the sci-fi fantasy genre. It's delving into and seeing what is possible within the confines of the story.
Yeah, no, I totally feel you there. So you, as a writer, I've noticed right away, you already have many different series and whatnot. You're playing in many different sandboxes. They're not really connected, are they? Like most of them?
Like, so they could. I like to leave the options open. They were initially supposed to be interconnected. And maybe one day down the line I could find the way to thread that needle again. But I always want to make sure that every series that I do, you can read it by itself.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that I really hated as I was getting into comics, because I was starting to read with both DC and Marvel. And this was really like 2011 through like 2015, which I cannot believe was as long ago as it was. here's major tips for you for comics and prose writers. You're writing a series and you're connecting anything else. Don't make it a requirement that someone reads everything to understand anything. Like, I would start reading like first arc of Justice League Dark for New 52. You get to issue 6, and then at the end it's like, and this will be continued in I, Vampire number 9. And I'm like, you mean I have to buy the first 8 issues of I, Vampire just to understand this series that I've been following for the last 6 months?
Yeah.
Or no. Or I could just drop both series. And that's what will predominantly happen for you. Indie creators, do not think you're going to build this wild, massive universe. You're building a series. You are building one. And from there, cameos is the best you're going to get. Basically don't think that you are setting up, don't think you're Iron Man in 2008 and you're setting up your 23 movie interconnected everything. You're Marvel in 1961 with Fantastic Four, and that's it. Like, that is your bread and butter. You are not doing anything else.
Yeah. And I mean, trying to set up all that kind of stuff, you're just putting this extra weight on yourself. At the end of the day, just build something that has the potential. You know what I mean? Like, just allow it to have that potential and allow it. But if that's the plan all along, I'm going to build this huge bloody thing. You're like, yeah, well, people need to continue to be along on the ride. If they feel like that is what they have to be around for, it feels like a lot. And really, you just want to get them to love the characters that you have, and fall in love with their journeys and the stories that happen to them, and then the rest of that kind of comes together naturally.
Yes, and I will say for fantasy and sci-fi readers, if you go too far, you can actually end up in hard mode. Like, think about it this way: Game of Thrones and Star Wars. Our fans get really invested in the works, which means that if you keep going down one rabbit hole after another, and you say you're going towards an end, well, they're going to want the end. They're going to want like a satisfying ending saying, I can put this away and not have any questions whatsoever. I've been involved in theater playhouses for so long. I have seen 1-act plays. I have seen 5-act plays where 16 different things aren't resolved, and people still come out going, that was a masterpiece. 16 things don't get resolved at the end of book 4 of 7 of a fantasy series. People are starting to crawl up the walls. So keep that in mind as you're writing, is every time you throw out a new thread, you're going to have to find a way to end it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I totally feel you there. So let's go into your work more now. Okay. So, like I said, you've done a lot of different stuff. You've and I mean most of it is in kind of the fantasy realm and whatnot. Take us through the formation of an idea and turning it into, even the formation of an idea and figuring out what medium do I want it to be in? How long is this going to be? All that kind of stuff. How are you What is your process for figuring all of that out?
Oh, great. So usually brainstorming happens both naturally, and it can actually come about in a forced manner. And so naturally comes to me like at any time. You almost always want to have your phone or your computer on you at all times as a writer, because our phones now have amazing notes apps where you can literally just be like, and let me just type this up and I'm going to see what's going on. Like, my brain runs constantly, and it's keeps thinking up crazy new ideas. And once you have that spark, you immediately are trying to start figuring out where best it goes. Like, I'm at this stage right now with my new upcoming series and my other prose works, where I'm like, okay, can this fit into Legends of the Realm? Is it better as a prose series, or is this one of those fun things that I want to put away for 5 years to come back later? And so I start playing. Like, that is the secret for me, and what I really want to impress for newer writers. When you're thinking of everything, don't try and have it make sense. Just keep letting your mind not wander, but keep asking questions. Okay, if this is true, then what's going on here? If this is true, what's going on here? And just keep typing, and your brain has this insane ability to make the most untenable connections you've ever heard of. Now, that's more the natural type of spark, and it comes when you're like watching TV going, well, why didn't you just do this instead of this? Or a fun lyric in a song, or literally just a street sign. You would be amazed. Like, there's a very famous short story called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omaha. And how do you get Omaha? This person was driving past Salem, Oregon. Salem, O. And that is their freaking one of the most famous short stories. It's read way, way too many places. Forced brainstorming can still actually be fun, because what you're then doing is you're continuing to ask questions. It's like, okay, I need a new character. I need someone for this series that I've got going on in my head. Like the one that I would really like to talk with Katrina about in the next 4 years. I promise, Katrina, I do see that. But like, okay, so I'm going to get this character, and he's going to be really weird. He's going to be like a god detective, and it's going to be really fascinating. But sometimes sparks fly in that don't belong in one place or another, even though you think they are. So always be okay with taking your ideas and moving them. As you're building up your bookshelf and everything else, you start finding ideas that don't quite work where they do right now. And yeah, Katrina, I promise I'm trying to figure it out. Like, it's so hard figuring out everything, because if you're a writer, you have a bazillion ideas and you're trying to reconcile everything. And our thoughts, while we make great weird connections, that means we sometimes really try to put this triangle peg into the square hole. And that's just not how it's supposed to go. So for some reason, I am seeing just myself.
Yeah, sorry about that. Where were we?
So we were just putting a triangle peg in a square hole and just saying that sometimes just be willing to maneuver your ideas from one IP to the other. So literally one character may be in the wrong story and needs to be in the right one. That's how it is for me for creating. And from there, you start with the idea. You take the idea that's probably 2 or 3 sentences. You turn it into a page, like just page of concept, and from beginning, don't even worry about the middle, end. Like, here's what's going on here. And then all you're doing from that point, from that page, you're just filling in. Like, okay, now I need an outline, and saying, okay, something needs to happen here to get from point A to point D, and then I need to get down to point G. And with comics, then it can be really easy because you're like, oh, I need 24 pages, so I now just need to take this page, spread it out over 24, and start adding action and dialogue. With prose, it's like, okay, I have this page. I need to make sure this part equals 15,000 words. This part equals 15,000 words here and here. And it's hard. Writing a prose book is harder than writing a comic book. It just is. Like, I can write a graphic novel in the amount of time it can take me to write 3 chapters. Because 3 chapters can equal 10,000 words at times. And Chuck knows from writing comic scripts, 10,000 words. Oh. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, go ahead, Chuck.
No, what were you going to say?
I was about to ask.
Excited about one of the questions? Because there's...
Yes. You want to answer?
Katrina, since we're talking about it, she said, do I think prose is harder? I would actually think it's very different. See, the thing is that prose it's definitely a lot more, like, you're doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
You're doing a lot more of the actual work in prose, where you have to where we're lucky we get to leave a lot of that to our artists and letterers and colorists and all the other people who get to do that. So really, we just have to explain enough that they're inspired to do what's in our heads. I will say, though, that with comics, there's kind of a lot more tools to be able to play with, as far as being able to, like, you need to kind of respect the other parts of making comics. You need to respect the art, you need to respect the color, you need to respect all that kind of stuff. You need to respect things like page turns and size and all that kind of stuff, in a way that you don't have to do it with prose. Like, in prose, you can make a 50,000 word book, or you can make an 80,000 word book, and it doesn't matter. But in comics, you can make a 24-page floppy, but you can't make a 60-page floppy. And there's all these other technical aspects and these other things. So I think there's the learning curve to making comics is a little steeper, because there's so many other technical aspects that we don't assume. But just as far as, like, strictly from an ease of writing aspect, yeah, man, there's so much more work when it comes to writing novels. And actually, it was funny when you were talking about, like, finding the right ideas for the right spots and whatnot. I was sitting down. I was talking about Eric and I are working through Essence House right now, through the second book, and we're talking about it. And I came up with this idea that I was very excited about, and so I pitched to him and I said, "What about this?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, but how would that even happen?" I said, "Shut up, shut up, shut up, Eric. That's not what's important. Is that a good idea? Like, wouldn't that be cool?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, that'd be cool, but how would we do it?" I'm like, "If we like it and we're excited enough about the idea, we can find a way. Do you like it? Is it worth us spending the brain power to make that work?" "Yeah, okay, cool. Well, then let's spend the brain power, see if we can make this work." So, yeah, I mean, we do have to do a lot more work for prose. Which question were you excited about? Was it Brian's or Ciernova?
I'm gonna start with Brian's. Yeah.
Because he was okay. So for fantasy, do you tend to build the world heavily first, or do you develop the story and build the world around it?
So Brian, I'm actually gonna pick option C and go with characters. No. So no matter what, and this is true not in fantasy, this is true in storytelling, flat out. It's not about the plot. It's not about the setting. It's not about the foibles. People come for characters. I just saw the Friends reunion. Why was Friends the greatest show on television for 6 years? It wasn't because they had fantastic plot ideas, because they didn't. It wasn't because they were breaking brand new ground. They weren't.
The world building.
No, the world building. It was 2 New York apartments and a coffee shop made up 85% of the settings here. But the characters, were as weirdly lovable as you could possibly get. And that is a really hard thing sometimes for writers, because sometimes you're like, I have this cool thing. And it's like, you don't just need the cool thing. You need that person to have the cool thing. And you need that person to be a person. And they can't just be a paragon. And they can't just be absolute crap. Like, I remember being in our Arthurian Legends course in undergrad of college, and we were reading the Holy Grail, and our professor was so confused because none of us liked Galahad. Like, you had all these 20-somethings, and they're like, but this is the most perfect knight. This knight gets everything right. And we're like, yeah. Well, what's your problem with this? Hey, Jesus had more character than this guy. This guy literally shows up, does the right thing, and then goes on to the next thing. And Jesus had more character than that. And like, you can one of the things I don't like in modern comics, modern fantasy, which is just like a constant thing, is people think to be more compelling a character, you need to be more negative. And that's not true. If you want one of the best portrayals of Superman in modern comics right now, it's actually not a Western comic. It's All Might from My Hero Academia. This guy who is slowly dying, but is like the #1 hero. And he is constantly going, I need to figure out what else is going on and how else I can help people, because I am the symbol of peace. And if I if I do the wrong thing, if I screw up, then it could have disastrous consequences. I'm like, that's Superman. Yeah. That is what is going on with Superman.
It's funny because even in like, you talk about Galahad. I would say that like growing up, a lot of us, I loved Lord of the Rings,
Mm-hmm.
and I read the three Lord of the the Fellowship of the Rings. I read, of course, The Hobbit, and I hadn't gone into too much of the rest, and hadn't really been interested. I'd moved on to other things and all that, and then I moved on and I learned more about Silmarillion and all that kind of stuff, and I realized Gandalf actually sucks as a character. Like, I don't like Gandalf. I know. Is he one of your favorites? Because I saw you kind of wince there.
No, I completely agree. Like, so much of Gandalf's character is, and why weren't you here?
Well, it's why weren't you here? But also, he's a demigod. And so what was neat was when I was first enjoying those books, he was a human in my mind. And so I thought, oh, the studies and the things that this man has had to do to attain all of this power and to do all of this stuff, it's just amazing. And then you're like, nah, he's a god. And you're like, oh, well, then that sucks. Like, that's terrible. And I think that's something where, we kind of grow up and we get our own sentimentalities for stuff, and we start to get our own certain feeling for storytelling. Do I have any right to tell Tolkien that I'm not a fan? Not necessarily, but I would still say to his face, dude, what a boring ass choice to make it. He would have been so much more interesting if he was a human, a flawed human who had to do all this stuff rather than a bloody demigod. Like, come on. So yeah, and I agree fully with your idea of characters being the center. Totally. In fantasy, of course, you want to world build, you want to have fun with all that kind of stuff. You can only do so much of that, though. I mean, the characters really are what's going to be the centerpiece to all of it. So if you don't have strong characters, it won't matter that you have this amazing world and this story filled with all these awesome stuff. If we don't care about the characters and the journey, then it just doesn't matter.
Right. So building off of that and like answering Brian's continuing questions, that would be at 10:46.
Oh, gee. Oh, he asked more.
Yeah.
I haven't gone back there. Well,
yeah.
Well, why don't we try to do Seer Nova first, and then we'll jump into
Sure
that.
thing.
So that is so true. In the beginning of writing my graphic novel, The Seer Chronicles, it was around 1,200 pages. Then I edited it down and had to figure out what was coming first and what not. Yeah, man.
Yeah. And with graphic novels for indie comics, pages come at a premium. That is one of the harder things for graphic novels when it comes to prose, is especially as an indie guy, you have to pay a premium for it. Now, the fight scene that takes 3 pages in comics could take up only 2 boring ass sentences in prose. But they're now, I'm gonna say this. Writing good fight scenes in prose fantasy is some of the hardest things I have ever seen. I can name one guy in fantasy prose who has done it masterfully. R.A. Salvatore, and that's it. There's him and a bunch of wannabes, including me. But also building off of this, Chuck, for what you were saying also about writing prose is different levels of harder. I agree on that. But you know what prose writers are allowed to be that comics writers aren't? Assholes. You can, yeah, you can just be like, I hate the world. Here, I'm going to write all my stuff and send it out to the editor. They're going to come in. I'm going to curse them, hide in my hole, and do some more. You can't do that in comics. One, especially in the indie world, it's a very small world. Things your attitude will get out really quick, because you need to work with people. You need to work with your artist or your artists for a team. You need to work with a pro letterer. Trust me, lettering can screw you. That it's one of those things where people totally just forget about until it's wrong. And you need a good editor, and you need a good publishing team. And if people don't like you, they're not going to work with you.
Yeah.
They don't need your money. They can get someone else's pretty quick.
And if they do work with you, the asshole tax, I've said it before, the asshole tax is a real thing, and they'll just charge you more.
Yeah.
You know, because I've seen it. I don't know how many times where it's like, I don't want to work with this douchebag. I'm going to throw an extra $10 a page on there. And if he doesn't like it, cool, then I just won't work with him. And if he decides to pay, you know, what will amount to several $100s more by the end of the book, then okay, cool, yeah, you made it worth my while. I'll do that. And if you've been a nice guy, you might have even gotten a break from them. They might have said, "Oh, you know what? You're good. I want to be able to work with you in the future. Let's make it a little bit cheaper. Let's, you know, I'm going to go a little bit easier on you because I really want to be able to do this because I'm excited about working in this world and with you." So yeah, you're 100% right. How you treat people is so much more important in comics than it is in prose.
Oh, all right. What is?
Let's find. Okay, are you ready for these Brian Manell? Are you ready for these Brian Manell questions?
Yeah.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, dive in. So, I think if I have it right, you tend to build the world after you build story and characters. When you start building the world, do you develop it early on with your characters and story, or do you develop the world as you write through the story?
Little bit of both. You basically want your baseline. You want your like time periods. Like you want to be able to have your sort of like dress style. You want to make sure you're not writing a medieval fantasy and out pops the car. What really helps Story Bible. It really will feel like you're writing two books at the same time, but basically one's your book, one's your encyclopedia. Like, here's what's going on with these characters, and you're just building that. Here's these worlds. And if you're not as spatially oriented as I am, you can start saying things like, oh yeah, I need to recognize that the mountains are south of the kingdom, not north. And I need to make sure that like the ice is more east, whereas the desert's in the west.
And that's why maps in fantasy are so awesome.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you on that, by the way. And also, basically, have enough of the world built that you're able to write the story. You know, that you can write through, and then as you're going through it, you get to discover more of the world. You might find out things about certain tribes, certain races, certain countries or people or whatever that build and add on to that you certainly can go back and edit and play with and add more depth into what you're doing. But you don't need all that depth before you start writing. And in fact, that depth, having all of that world building, feeling like you have to have it all done beforehand, can actually kind of crush your story, because it can make you feel like you're never ready to write the story because I need to know more, like what happened 7 centuries ago, that there's now this big lake here, and you're like, it doesn't matter, man, figure out the fucking lake later. It's not a big deal. Like, you can just say something big happened 7 centuries ago or 7 millennia ago and then come back to it another time. So yeah, don't get bogged down in that stuff or you'll never finish it. I got so much back. Oh, and Steph's in here. That's never good. That's never good.
This is so much fun.
How is this Chuck guy not gotten banned yet? He did. That's why. Chuck struggles with prose in general. I struggle with somebody, that's for damn sure. There's no pros, only cons. That's cute, Brian. I like that. Your editor might curse you back from their hole. Yeah. Chuck is a whore. He'll work with anyone. And that's true, because I worked with Steph. If I'm willing to work with Steph, I will work with absolutely anybody. Real questions. Way to go, Brian. Yes. Very much so. Thank you so much, Steph, for coming in and making this fun as always, you bastard. Yeah, see, I'm just here for random commentary. You guys are all good. Burn! Thank you, buddy. Man, I love when you come in here because we've got all this amazing information and shit, and then Steph just comes in and draws tits on all of it, and then we just don't know what we're talking about anymore. So good for you. By the way, Steph, why don't you put your website in there so that we can talk about so that you can show off your new book? Because Steph does have a new art book that's out, and he would love for you to check it out. And guys, if you can also drop Jack's link in the chat as well. What is the name? Legends of the Realm?
Legends of the Realm is the series. So I put the bit.ly in our private comments. So once again, this is classic high fantasy that you're going to know and love. That is what is going on currently for me. Katrina, you should be promoting yourself all the time because your work is fantastic and you're really easy to work with. That is so, yeah. But that's the Steph. Yeah, we're working on drawing the sexy elf babes right now. For real. Legends of the Realm, like we are doing this sort of like launch point to the series. And so that's what we're doing with this one, like telling a story that you can read, pick up, and put down, but also launches this whole world. Oh, geez. I'm looking at Brian's question going, that could take so much. Chuck's like, do you have another hour?
Yeah, right? Like, you know how many episodes we could do of that?
Yeah.
Okay, so Brian, I think the most important thing is, and I'm sure Jack would agree with me here, budget. Understand what you can handle and then what you're going to need other people to handle. And then also, are you able to pull that off? You know what I mean? Like, have you done the work to get that big of a fan, that the kind of fan base that can hopefully deal with the amount of money that you need? And if not, yeah, what about you? What do you think to add on to that?
Start smaller. No matter what. I see this so many times with indie creators going, and how do I start my series? I'm like, you wait 3 years. You don't want your series right now. You want your ash can. You want your 8-page short stories, and you want to do 3 of them, and suddenly you've got a full floppy comic. You want to be involved in stuff like the comic book schools, creator anthologies, because they'll literally walk you through the process. You want to build up your repertoire, because while you're going 1-pager, 2-pager, 4, 8, up to a full 1 issue, 2 issues, you're building a reputation. Like, you don't want to do that 200-page graphic novel because no artist has worked with you yet, and so you may not be working with someone who you actually really want to be tied to for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Just getting through the creation and a crowdfunder. And other times it's like you're building this reputation of not only am I easy to work with, I pay on time. Indie writers paying on time is going to put you in the upper echelon of creative talents for all your artists. Like just that fact of they turn in the art, I go on to PayPal and send the money within an hour. They're like, oh my God, I got paid immediately. I'm going to work on the next thing now. That is the sort of thing that is that. But with indie writers, it's figuring, like Chuck said, what can you handle? And it's not just what you can write. It's what you can conceivably, let's be honest, in comics, lose in production costs, because you are going to lose money. To start off, you are going to lose a lot of money. Doing indie comics is not for the faint of heart. And and we're not saying this to dissuade anyone. It's so, I say this all the time for people so they can know what they're about to get into. If you are doing indie comics, while you figure out who best to talk to for marketing advice and actually becoming a good indie comics writer, you're just losing money. You're hoping to lose just enough money that you can keep going.
Yeah. I love that Steph comes in. He says, you have the best guest, Chuck. And I'm not sure if that's because he's trying to sell his sexy elves, because he knows a guy who can put sexy elf babes on cover, or because you just went and said, you're about to lose a bunch of money. And he's like, this guy's a treat to be around. But guys, Jack's right, man. Like it's tough, especially like publishing and whatnot early on. It's not necessarily easy. You need to know that it is going to be a bit of a money pit at the first, and you have to be ready for that. But also you have to be ready to put the work in. Wendy and I started by creating a fantasy game that was worldwide. It was a play-by-post role-playing game. And so when we went to the comics world, she wanted to bring that world, that game that we had created and that story, and bring it straight into comics and start making a series. And I'm like, yeah, no, we can't. That's way too much fucking work. So instead, I was like, why don't we just focus on your character? You make a cool little 3-issue arc, because we know that we can do that. We can build some interest in that. And then from there, if people keep loving it, we can keep building and doing more arcs. And then we have our world and we have all that stuff happening. So if there's a way to still do your plan and still make that series you want without actually making a series. One-shots, shorts, graphic novels, all that kind of stuff are all great ways of being able to do that. Think about I think it's Michael Linsner's Dawn. What he does is kind of ongoing, but it's just shorts of that particular character. So yeah, man, think of stuff like that. Steph says, I meant your guests are awesome. Do they know this is a cable access show? If they don't know beforehand, they know now, sure as shit. They see my amazing lighting and stuff, and they just go, oh, that's where we're at. Okay, all right. I shouldn't have dressed up. Before we start to wrap it up, is there anything else that you guys wanted to know about, or Jack, that you wanted to be able to mention or talk about?
At this point, I'd say one of the things I want to mention is, that being said, all the negatives, this is in fact one of the best times to be involved in comics that I have ever been a part of. And I have not been involved in it as long as some other people, but like, I'd say even including the image boom in the 90s, when basically you would make a book and someone would go out and buy 10 copies of it. That you still had so many barriers for comics creation at that point. Right now, like Legends of the Realm, my artist is in Greece. And if I didn't, he probably would have been on this show anyways at 5 a.m, because he loves this so much. It's such a great time because we're getting, we are really stretching the limits of what it means to be in comics. The comics themselves are not being seen as really cool, but everything that comics themselves are producing, like the byproducts, are showing up in mediums all over. We're seeing this really great diversity of thought and experience that's going on in comics. Like, you can always bet that Monstrous is going to do something that pushes the envelope. And you're like, okay, what else is coming out now? So that is one of the things that I love. Like, and again, it's what you're saying with fantasy is now that we're getting all this really fun, weird, diverse thought. You're getting things like, okay, Monster Hunter International. What happens if you actually have a paramilitary force trying to fight vampires with a bounty system versus what the E. Schwab and N.K. Jemisin are doing, saying, hey, you can do fantasy and not just focus on white Germanic medieval settings. You can go elsewhere, to which everyone's minds are collectively blown.
Taurus Comics, this is a golden age for indie creators. There are so many outlets that we didn't have 20 to 30 years ago. Yeah, it's so true, man.
So true.
Absolutely. It's the golden age of sexy elf girl comic covers. Very true. Comics are cool, and it is a great time for comic creators. It's true. I mean, I even have friends who are like, dude, the stuff that we can do and the ease of making comics now compared to what it was even 10 years ago and more is ridiculous. So yeah, we have this chance, and I'm actually seeing it in things like Kickstarter, where you see the bar of what's funding and what's not, and that continues to raise the work that people have to put in and all that kind of stuff. People are stepping up and they're trying to make that stuff happen, and yeah, man, we're seeing the bar raise, and I'm really enjoying that. And Kyron, why are you going through all of your different? Kyron was in here as Kyron, then he was in here as Taurus Comics, now he's in here as Four Tales Podcast. Are you just like flexing that you have all these different fucking things happen? Jeez, dude. Yeah, I know. Yeah, you're working on a bunch of stuff, Brian. We're all really excited to see what you're doing too, man. And before we go, please, Jack, tell us about your book. Tell us about your Kickstarter. Give us that pitch.
Good. So Legends of the Realm Torn Soul is it's exactly everything I wanted since I was 13 in a comic book. You have this mage Camridian who is not like Gandalf, not just a demigod that understands everything immediately. He comes into this kingdom of Danisfire, becomes the court mage, and he ends up overthrowing the kingdom and establishing a brand new utopia, only to see it all fall to ruin. But as the book keeps going on, you hear the same tale told by 3 different perspectives. You have the bard who's telling the epic fantasy that everyone knows and loves. But you also have his princess, who tells the romance and the betrayed love that he does. And then you also have the darkness that tells of the tragedies and the compromises that he made to actually win a war. With every person that tells a story tells it in a different way, and it really shows different faces for Camridian, who's known as the Torn Soul. Does a story change depending on who tells it? Absolutely. But does that also mean that someone who is a hero in someone else's eyes is really just the villain, or is it more complicated? Definitely bards are flaky. If you go to the campaign page and you look at the bard, who is the very first image in the comic, you're going to look at him going, I know this guy's about to sing Toss a Coin to Your Witcher. And he wrote it.
Bards are the sexy cover artists of the medieval world.
Yes, they are.
Look at this. And look at this, Kyron. That sounds interesting. And then this needs to be funded. I'm sure that is somehow him as well. And if not, whoever you are, G.I. Joe, I'm sure you're lovely. But for some reason, that feels like another. Yeah. And see, and Kyron's back again. Yes, I did set a low bar, but that's because I'm a chunky dude and I don't like to jump. So as long as I can shuffle over the bar, I'm happy, and I think everyone else is too. No one wants to put in a lot of work. Come on. You know what it's like. You draw circles for a living. All right. So, Jack, thank you so much for coming out, dude. I'm really excited to have you. Dude, we were really glad to do it, man. Guys, thank you so much. I don't even know who the hell is happening next week. We have so many great guests. We're already at episode 27. We're going to keep on pushing it. And Steph can make as many terrible, terrible jokes as he wants. But the fact is, he fucking started this. So this is all on him. This was his idea. So, yes, I agree, hon. Yay for Jack. Kyron is showing us all the support. Hey, man, Kyron, if you like it with all of those different accounts, that would be even better. So, thank you guys so much. You're all amazing. Brian, we're glad to do it, man. Take care of everybody. Peace, love, and comics. My name is Chuck, and I do give a fuck. Be safe, everybody.